Hey everybody, I'm Brian Shields. I'm part of the Funding Circle team. Funding Circle is an international lender to small businesses. We use technology to create efficiencies in the underwriting process, in the customer experience process, and the capital formation process. So what that typically means is if instead of going to a bank and waiting for them to figure out how long it's going to take them to underwrite a deal and figure out if you're a fit, et cetera, we can do that faster, and internally we can do it cheaper given the technology we have. As mentioned up here, we're international, so we've lent a little bit over, I think it's at $3 billion now? Yeah, $3 billion to small businesses in the US, in the UK, in Germany, and the Netherlands. And we've raised a little bit over $370 million in equity capital to continue to scale our operations. Great, so I think like one big question is, well, great, Brian, that sounds awesome. Sounds like your company's amazing, but that doesn't really sound like a software company. Why are you here? What are you here to talk about? Good question. So first I lay out some of our partners. Folks you'll see up here include banks, include highly regulated data and technology platforms, et cetera. And so what that's required of us is to find a way for Funding Circle, which is part technology and part service, and package it into a way that can be utilized as a software. And so a lot of what you're seeing here is some of these partners utilize us as if we were a platform for distribution to their companies, or they'll leverage us as a distribution channel, similar to the way Jalea laid out, for us to create a unique and differentiated customer service to the business owners. So I've decided to focus on one specific example of this, lending as a service, which is one of our different ways that we can create a software experience for a partner. So banks, which are both very valuable partners and highly regulated partners, have come to Funding Circle and said, you know how to do lending, we know how to do lending, but you know how to do it faster and to create a better experience. So just for high-level notes, Funding Circle has an NPS of something around 87. A bank, let's say Wells Fargo, for example, has an NPS south of 20. So they look at us and the technology and the online experience that we provide and find value there. They also look at us as being able to underwrite loans that are significantly lower dollar amount than they can do, and then want to understand how they can leverage that for themselves. So when I first got to Funding Circle a little over 2 years ago, we didn't really have APIs, we didn't have externally leverageable landing pages or any kind of software. And so we had all this inbound interest from different partners who said, hey, we want to work with you. And then we had to figure out how do we actually work with them in a way that's scalable and repeatable amongst different partners. So what did that break down to? Well, we created two kind of pieces of software. One was kind of a front-end experience. We found that a lot of the business owners that came to banks were really looking for simplicity in interfacing with that bank. So they wanted to understand, hey, how can I apply at 7 p.m. when my banker's gone home already and I'm just getting done with my workday? How do I interact with the bank that way? They also wanted to be able to know that if they needed to come back to an application and submit documents or check the status, they wanted to be able to do that at will, whether it was from their phone while they were on the go, or if it was 7 in the morning before anybody got in the office. So we created a front-end experience that was customizable and brandable for those banks, leveraging our back-end service and software. The other thing that we found was really useful for banks and some of the other providers that I mentioned earlier, in particular QuickBooks and folks like that, were ingesting data from those systems and providing back an indication of offer. So the simple way to think about it is inputting your Social Security number into a credit card platform. You can type in your number and then a credit card offer will come back if there's one for you at all. That doesn't exist for banks today with their lending offerings. So you can't necessarily go to a bank and then provide some basic data and then understand whether or not there is an offer for you and whether or not you should then invest the further time to spend with that bank. So we were then able to create an API that allowed them to do that in platform. So they can integrate Funding Circle's offers into their user experience, into their loan origination system and online banking systems, or their specific product, like I'm illustrating with QuickBooks here, and be able to provide a seamless experience for the business owner. So that led to a bunch of different victories and challenges. I'll talk through these. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go along. The overall goal for this is to just say, hey, here are some hurdles, or here are where the bodies have been buried from my experience, and hopefully help you shortcut some of yours. So the first was, we were able to launch or get close to launch with several platforms and large, well-known partners. So we have 2 banks that we're working with to deliver both the front end and the instant price offering. When you think about working with a bank, it's both an attractive opportunity because you can do press releases, it creates a lot of validity to your product offering, et cetera. And so we're finding that that is true. However, it's also been a huge amount of effort to get in with those partners. And so we'll talk about that in the challenge slide, but it's definitely something that we're actually able to accomplish. Second, we were able to launch an API, in particular with QuickBooks and 2 other financing partners. We've seen an increase of 3.5% lead conversion from that. Sorry, 3.5 times increase in lead conversion. So if we were converting 100 leads before, we're converting 350 now, which is great. That was the benefit of us applying a software API on top of our existing digital service, but also created a very seamless experience for these companies. So where they were interacting with lenders who had a manual process and would only be able to send co-marketing through their platforms and then create a very hand-to-hand experience for their business owners and customers, we were able to come in and say, hey, Mr. and Miss Business Owner, you are now approved. All you have to do is submit 2 things, or just hit send me your data from this platform. And it's become a very valuable experience. Second, and I think Jaleh hit on this, and I want to drive it further, we identified value propositions. And this, I think, is important for everybody in the room who's thinking about using their platform to distribute via API or any other service strategy. It took us a while to identify what was important to our partners and what value propositions to hit on to be able to successfully integrate and then distribute through them. So one of the things that we found through several conversations was just ease of integration. When you're dealing with large financial institutions or large organizations generally, they don't want to invest a lot of resources into the engineering components or into the maintenance. They don't want to commit to SLAs to upkeep on their end, et cetera. So when you can come to them and say, we literally just need you to put a logo on this and hit send or OK, and you're good to go, made them very happy. And in the instances where they did need to do actual integration work, our API documentation was smooth, easy to read. It took people less than 2 weeks to get up and running and get a staging test ready to go. And we were live within a month, which was really exciting for some of these players. In addition to that, we found that the additional services tied really well. So we as a platform provide a lot of support to our partners around marketing in particular. So a lot of these platforms will say, we want to work with you. We think that there's value in providing an online or seamless experience through your platform, but we don't really know how to get the word out. We can then effectively offer white-labeled marketing services to those partners and allow them to, again, put their logo on something, review and approve, and then just hit send. We can do the targeting, we can do the collateral development, and we can do all of the campaign management. All the partner has to do is just watch and observe and appreciate the success that we're helping drive for them. It gets to the last point, which is reporting. So as I mentioned, I think a theme through all these value propositions is just like ease and simplicity. I can't underscore enough how important it was for us to get the reporting right to our partners. They want to understand that we did X and it took a certain amount of time and investment and resources on their side and a certain amount of investment on our side. And that X turned into a certain ROI. And then how do we measure that over time? Particularly in selling into these larger organizations, we're dealing with kind of an enterprise sales style relationship management where there's both the sell and offer as well as the relationship development. And so for us to be able to provide easy reporting for those partners to then sell up the chain to their boss or to the CEO made their job much easier. And so coming with that already in hand and showing it as part of the pitch to say, the reporting's really easy, here are the data points that you'll be able to articulate to your boss, got us through several meetings very quickly because then that counterparty could say, all right, I know how to sell you internally, I know what the win is going to be, and I can take that metric and sell it internally. I think last but not least, I had this conversation earlier, we were able to weather the 2016 storm. So for those of you who work with financial institutions or any of the online fintech lenders, you'll know that 2016 was a little bit challenging for us broadly. Lending Club had a lot of headlines, OnDeck had a lot of headlines, Prosper had a lot of headlines. Thankfully, Funding Circle didn't. And while this isn't a victory I could necessarily control, it was something that we thankfully were able to see through 2016 And not having press in some instances actually ends up being a good thing depending on the context of the environment. And so that was a big win for us. I think that another interesting thing from a challenges perspective is just evaluating like the how of how to execute something effectively in a BD perspective. So first, sales cycles were long. I don't think I have to tell everybody here how long these sales cycles can be. One of the things that came up frequently was that we had multiple stakeholders and roadblocks that came up without warning. I'm dealing with a partner right now who threw a massive, I want to say 10-page information security due diligence packet to us at the last minute before we were supposed to sign the contract. So what I would say and suggest to that is to avoid that problem, lay out a roadmap to launch. One of our best practices is kind of a path to pilot document that we put together with our partners. So we'll say, what are the steps between now and, let's say, June that we need to go through to successfully launch this partnership? That might be going through approval committees on their side. That might be doing certain due diligence on information security or data protection, et cetera. But laying that out, I think, both helps them commit to the things that they need to do and championing your product internally. And also, it helps you get your team organized so that if you need one of your teams to invest some time in filling out due diligence requests or doing demos, they can allocate the time and resources effectively. Last thing I think is, or second thing is brand awareness. I'm sure you all are dealing with this as well, but there's Funding Circle, there's Lending Club, there's OnDeck, there's Prosper. There are a lot of different fintech lenders out there, and I couldn't count on 10 hands how many times I'd walk into a room and they'd say, "Oh yeah, I've heard of Lending Circle. You guys are the Prosper guys, right?" And despite me having a name tag that says Funding Circle or a business card that I just handed to them, they consistently get that confused. And I think that's both a benefit and a challenge. The benefit is that you get to set and define the market to them. Because if they can't differentiate between your product and another, then you have the opportunity to make the differentiation clear. They haven't done the research, so you can articulate it for them. Obviously, it's a little bit of a challenge because you want to walk in and you want people to say, "Yeah, I've heard of your product, it's amazing. All of my friends are talking about it." But we're at younger companies, and that's part of what comes with this. And so I'm excited about that, and that's part of the reason I'm at a place like Funding Circle. And so hopefully you all are too. I think the last thing is balancing time between targets. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about at Funding Circle are our strategic objectives and how these different conversation threads we're having with partners aligns with those strategic objectives. So we could be talking to Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Barclays, and Sage, which is the QuickBooks of the UK. How do we balance our time? These are very large, complex organizations that take a long time to sell, with whom you think there should be a high ROI, but in some cases there isn't, in some cases there are. How do you differentiate which ones are useful to invest in? So my question to you all, I guess, like how many of you actually have a scorecard by which you filter business development targets? I know you do. I find that to be hugely useful. It can be tough because you want to take all the opportunities that come your way, but being able to score them and say, here are the 5 things that matter to our company, whether it's customer acquisition, brand, alignment of the beauty of experience, a shout out to Zero, ease of integration, et cetera, I think helps you say yes to some people and no to other people. I never want to say no to a meeting, but if I can easily just articulate, hey, these are our priorities, and if you can't align with those, we shouldn't waste either of our times, people have actually appreciated that more in the long run, because we're not then taking 30 minutes, 45 minutes out of each other's time to explore something that might not be there, and we already kind of can intuitively figure out isn't a fit. I think it also helps with counterparties, because you can then articulate how to work with you, and if you can make it easy for people to understand how to work with you, then they can get to the answer quickly and help you and them find value quickly. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. So what are my 3 pieces of advice? I think that some of this has already come out. Number 1, plan for the sales cycle. So I expect that most of you have products that will both take time to integrate, but will also take time to explain. And if you haven't experienced this already in your development conversations, you will. And I would say plan for that sales time. Especially plan for it with your senior team. So I know I've either worked on business development teams or strategic partner teams where somebody's come in and said, you know what, we can set up partnerships or distribution relationships in as quick as 6 months, or I can get that done in the next quarter. And then they run into issues because they've overpromised in that, right? More importantly, they've aligned the resources at the C level down to expect those onboardings. So there's engineering resources that have gotten allocated for that. There's marketing time that's gotten allocated for that, et cetera. And when you don't meet those deadlines, that's money that's just been sitting on the table not being used. So I would say definitely plan for that sales cycle and be clear with your C-suite. Related to that, I would also be very aligned with management about what's important, and that's where the scorecard and the perception of ROI comes from. I tell people that there are always different ways to get paid, right? You can get paid with a revenue from a customer. You can also get paid with data if that's important to your business. You can get paid with press and help your business seem more validated by aligning with certain organizations. And I think that being clear with management to say, hey, look, how are we planning to get paid from these relationships? If I go out and create an opportunity for us to partner with these type of organizations, but it costs us our brand because we have to white label, is that valuable to us or not? And I think aligning with that scorecard and having sign-off, it covers your ass in board meetings a quarter or two down the road. I'd like that for everybody here. And the last point is not all press is good press. So I know I've worked with a lot of business development folks who chase press and headlines and push deals with the almost exclusive focus on that. Because they think that if I just get a headline, if I get this picked up by PR Newswire, et cetera, it's going to make me look good, it's going to make our company look good, everybody's going to be happy. But you don't always see the cost of doing that press release. And that's a challenge. Because number one, there could just be no value for either party involved. And when I call Steve and say, hey, I see you're working with so-and-so, how's that going? And Steve says, you know, we're getting zero value from that. That press release goes only as far as that conversation I have with Steve to ask how it's going. It doesn't get you any other business. Investors will do that as well, and other customers will do that. I think also that it can attract attention in times when you don't need that attention. So, you know, I would obviously have a close alignment with your head of comms or marketing and just assess, is a headline good for conversion? Is it good for building traction with our equity investors, et cetera? Because getting the headline is good, and you know, frankly, you can find ways to get headlines. But if they don't pay you in the things that you need strategically for the business, then it's not worth doing the effort. And I know anybody who's done an RFP for the purpose of getting a headline knows what I mean. So I breezed through that. I wanted to target about 20 minutes to leave any time for questions. So who's got questions? Or did I crush this so hard that I've answered all the questions? I'm getting a yes. So this
I actually have a question.
Yes.
Really good stuff, by the way. So.
Thank you.
So in a perfect world, I mean, you talked about lead time and sales cycle, just the extension of that. What services and solutions, either internally or externally, would you want to use to expedite that process?
Yeah, so I think let's break that down into stages, right? So there's kind of, yes?
Do you mind just repeating the question?
Oh, sure. So the question was, since I touched on sales cycle time and lead time, what types of tools or processes would be useful to help accelerate that sales time or lead time, or at least make it more efficient? So I'll first say that I think, you know, if you think about it in stages, right, the time that takes the most time, or the stage that takes the most time would be kind of the lead gen, identifying who to talk to stage. So I think there are a few things that are useful in whittling that time down. One are precedent partners in related industries. So if you can see, so I'll speak for myself. So we're a lender, and I wanted to see what other financial products did to distribute. Who do they partner with? So they partner with QuickBooks, they partner with certain banks. They didn't partner with other banks. They partnered with different marketing platforms. Great. They gave me a framework to think about what can and cannot work. And then I just cut out people that didn't fit that framework. Then there's the actual outreach phase, right? So it's like, hey, who do I talk to? Then how do I actually get a meeting with them? And that's where I think like technology comes really in handy. I mean, everything from, I have shortcuts in my email to just type out responses to basic questions. You know, hey, when can you meet? Here's my planner. To create, like you leveraging Boomerang for return emails so that I don't even have to set a reminder for myself to follow up with somebody. We also use Groove, which is an automated email. So if you have like a large list of people, 100 plus that you want to both personalize and set response flows to, Groove was really valuable for us. So we could send out blasts to 100 or 200 banks. We would then be able to set automatic chasers to those people without us having to follow up. And then once the person responded and wanted to set a meeting, we were good to go. So I think that at least takes some of the headache of the upfront process. And then, once you actually get somebody into a meeting and you're having strategic discussions, I mean, you know as well as I do, that can go from like a breadbasket to a barn really quickly. But I think one of the most important things with those conversations tends to be setting clear expectations of what it takes to get from here to there. So great, we've had an awesome introductory meeting. I've enjoyed talking to you. I think that these are the next steps. We should put this in front of your CMO. We should, Funding Circle needs to do a demo of our product to these 5 people. How can I get those scheduled in the next couple of weeks? What do you need from me? And I think that as a just tactic is really helpful because then it sets deadlines. And a lot of times people walk out of meetings without setting a deadline for things like that. So those would be my 3 tips there. Thanks. Sure.
Any other questions? I have one. A lot of the deals that you're doing, or just anyone in your space, revenue growth is important for us business development people as we're especially trying to grow ACMR. What, in general, like how do you usually structure rev share?
Yeah.
Is it basis points? Is it a one-time fee? Is it perpetual revenue? What's it look like in general in your space?
Yeah. So in general, most of folks like us we get paid on a percentage of loans or proceeds funded. So if somebody takes a $100 loan, then Funding Circle will get paid somewhere between 1% to 6% of that loan. And then we can split it up with the partner. So a lot of times we'll do 60-40, 70-30, something like that. Our conversion rates are such that we can generate meaningful high margin revenue for our partner in those deals. So it's pretty simple to understand. You have X number of customers. We're working together to fund Y number of those customers. That should translate into Z amount of revenue for both of us. There are other ways to work with partners, like in our space, that are intriguing. Some partners, in particular point of sale systems, or even some of the data platforms that are accounting focused or invoice focused, will look to us to place some of their balance sheet capital and generate return on that. So we're a marketplace, as I mentioned before, and we underwrite a deal and then use capital from a marketplace of people to fund that deal. So some people might say, look, I have $1 million. I want to put it somewhere and generate 10 to 15% interest on that in the meantime and create an additional lifetime value revenue stream for this customer that I have. And we can set that up for them. And so that we have a couple of relationships where that's happening, and it's been very attractive and valuable to the partner. And then as a framework to answer your question, a lot of times I think about what are the competitive concerns of that partner and how can we structure a revenue share that works for them. So we've had some partners who themselves consider themselves a financing platform. And so they'll say, if I give you a customer and they never come back to me, that's a loss for my platform. And so we create a revenue stream that's still ongoing and gets them paid in the same way they would have gotten paid if they were getting that customer in their platform, but just using the economics we have.